So my name's Ian Pollard. I'm product manager for developer experience, and my colleague here, I'm sure you know very well, Michael Hunger. He's the senior director for user innovation. So this talk is about the future of our user tools. So we're going to be talking actually about design and UX, which is kind of a novel thing for Neo4j. And what we're going to do is we're going to get into some of the detail behind Workspace, what it is, why we've done it, and how we kind of arrived at this. And what we do is also we get into a demo so you can actually see Workspace in action. You may have seen it a bit in the keynote, so what we're going to be doing is going into some of the detail and exploring what more kind of real-world workflows might look like. But really what I'd like from this talk, ideally, is for you to take away a sense of Neo4j's commitment to your time, your productivity as users. So when we're talking about all of this stuff, you know, Workspace is the first manifestation of like a new commitment to developer experience, but really this is a much broader strategy for the company. Okay, so let's get going. So you've already had the spoilers, right? Emil's preempted me. Michael's preempted me.
It was actually all unplanned, right? So the demo was actually not planned to be in the original keynote, and then we spontaneously put it in. That's why the spoiler is not so much of a spoiler, but it's still good to.
It's not a spoiler anymore. But this is the future of Workspace, right? So what we've done is we've unified Bloom, browser, and data importer into a single coherent surface. And really this builds on years of work on these tools. So these tools are already really, really powerful. And what we decided to do is we could have just continued with a strategy in this development phase of constantly adding more features, but we pumped the brakes and we actually took an approach, a UX-led approach in this dev phase, to try and focus on, you know, where's the value for users and how can we get more value, particularly for new users, people who perhaps don't write Cypher. So this has been kind of a driving influence on what we're trying to do. So,
So Bloom is a paid product, right?
Sorry?
Bloom is a paid product, you buy licenses. So does data imported the same thing?
No.
Buy Bloom, and then you.
So Bloom has two levels. So there's kind of the regular Bloom and Bloom Enterprise, and Bloom Enterprise is the paid product, and regular Bloom is the free product.
Yeah.
Right. And this is regular Bloom. This is not Bloom Enterprise with the extra sharing permission and all the other collaboration features that are part of Bloom Enterprise.
Yeah. And it's worth saying as well, because what we'll be showing with this is really, it's focused on two categories of user. One is kind of the new to Neo4j, new to graph user, and how can we get them, you know, quickly to that first graph epiphany. And then for more experienced, mature users, it's about how can we get you more productive? How can we get, you know, you having coherent workflows that, you know, just get you to knowledge more quickly. And the other side of that, of course, is, you know, you don't work in isolation, and, you know, sharing this stuff with your colleagues, we want that to be a nice thing, you to be able to bring more people within your organization on that journey. So, yeah, we're really excited to be talking about UX at a Neo4j conference, and hopefully, yeah, you're going to get a little bit of the backstory around this, and hopefully some insight into why we've done this and where we're heading. So the context of this, of course, the user tools, Bloom browser and data importer, right? So if you're a learner, these tools offer you a great way to get from zero to graph. They're the way you learn about graph databases, the way you learn about Cypher, and about how you visualize your data. Now, if you're a mature user, right, these are just the tools you use to get your job done. And what we're hoping to really do with Workspace, as I've said, is really just increase your productivity and, you know, hopefully make this a more pleasurable experience. And we're getting to some of the theory around the UX approach that we've taken. So really this is, you know, in some ways this is a bold move for Neo4j, right? To basically say, you know, for product managers here, stop shipping features for a quarter and actually take a more strategic perspective on user experience. So we think the hypothesis really resonates, though, and I'll just take you through that journey, and maybe you agree, but it'd be interesting to hear. So the first thing we did is we undertook multiple rounds of user experience research. So this is really Neo4j being design-led, using approaches like design thinking to go out, talk to users, and really get into detail about their workspace, their experience with the tools. And the feedback that we got was pretty stark, I'll be honest with you. So for new users, they didn't always understand or discover our products. They didn't know what they were for. Sometimes, our products have quite abstract nouns like aura and bloom. They sound cool, but it's not always obvious to a new user what their purpose is. So when they started using our tools, we also found that new users didn't really understand how they fit together, right? There wasn't a clear sense of how they might build workflows around these tools. And for experienced users, there was some resentment for sure, around needing to log into each tool separately, and a sense that just the time and emotion of having lots of windows or lots of tabs open, moving between the two, and maybe just the tools not really talking to each other. But the most common theme actually that came up, and this one stings, right, as a product manager, is users don't care about products, right? We've got all of these tools, all of these products, and actually what users are articulating here is they're saying, we care about capabilities, we care about our data, what we do with it, the jobs to be done. So this is kind of interesting feedback for product managers. A lot of bonfire of the egos kind of thing. It's like, okay, you might be managing a product with some brand equity and so forth, but actually, is this a good thing for a user? So an interesting journey that we've been on, I think. Now, what we also heard from both internal and external conversations was which is, as good as the products were, they don't look the same, they don't behave the same, they don't talk to each other. And actually, in going through this exercise, we got a much clearer sense of why that was important, right? Getting close to the details, our teams were able to build more context, more empathy around how users were working. And specifically that we found workflows very often spanned more than one tool. And where that was the case, we found things like time and emotion really degraded, really suffered. And here's where we get back to the need for a focus on user experience. So we could have continued to add more features to these tools, and we certainly will be doing that. But it was clear that a rethink in terms of UX would be useful to just unlock more value from these tools. So, that's quite an attractive thing. And, the other way we kind of looked at this was, you may well have seen in Michael's demo, tools like the GraphQL tool, adding new capabilities in a coherent way. This is something that UX, should be really opinionated about. So pumping the brakes, being strategic about user experience was really the path that led us to Workspace. So really, we had a design problem. And when I say design problem here, I don't mean just visual design. I mean being really purposeful about how we design products, right? Who we build them for, the jobs that you guys are trying to do. So our approach for this was really to take a UX-based perspective. You may have come across this framework. There are others. But the basic UX framework essentially sets out these tenets, right? And when we look at our user tools, we can argue about the beauty of the tools, the intuitiveness of the tools. That's kind of subjective, right? In terms of how simple do they need to be? Well, you guys are pretty smart. You're developers, analysts, data scientists, etc. How important is that? So we can have a discussion around those, but really for UX, the most important thing is consistency. And this is really hard to get right, and this is where we focused our attention initially. So consistency in UX and DX, it reduces the chances of people failing, doing something wrong. It improves the efficiency of learning. It is the foundation for all good UX. But actually what we began to discover when we started this project is consistency, at least for Neo4j and for many other organizations, is actually really hard to get right. And the problem, it turns out it's an incredibly common one for organizations, and it's well understood in the theory and in practice. And a lot of it we take from this guy you may know, Melvin Conway and Conway's Law. And this is a quote from his paper, How Do Committees Invent? And the quote often gets garbled, but this is the right one, this is the correct one. And Conway said, essentially, organizations that design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures of those organizations. Or, as we often abridge it, you ship your org chart. So what this means is that good firms, they're actually really rather efficient at solving customer problems, right? So if you have enough specialists and smart people, finding solutions is actually, it's rather easy. And therein lies some of the risk, right? So efficiency naturally manifests silos, and this is what we saw in Neo. So like minds and experts group together around a problem or a customer need. And silos are not inherently bad, right? They're teams or business units with short communication lines, clear insights into customer problems, good ideas for solutions, and they can move quickly and they can add customer value, right? But in that, at scale, you find divergent thinking, right? So consistency begins to degrade, and attempts to apply consistency, they get harder and they get more expensive, right? So fighting back against, Conway's Law, this is both a structural and an organizational and an operational problem, and it's something that was quite difficult for Neo4j. It had built up a number of internal silos. If our products externalize our internal structures, right, we needed to change our internal structures. And we need to do it in a way that doesn't degrade these dynamic capabilities, our ability to quickly add customer value. But also we need to do it in a way that's, not overly disruptive to the business, and, we can continue to go about building products. So let's take a look at one way that we approach this at Neo. So focusing on, scaling design and improving UX consistency, right? Here's a partial view of some of the product and engineering teams who are working in and around user tools. And, as you can see here, the problem is there's kind of a one-to-one relationship with a designer and an engineering team, or maybe a 1-to-2 relationship. But the problem is the further you get out from the core product estate, the less impact and influence designers have, all the way over to the far side there, where you've got a lunatic with some crayons and they're designing something and it looks completely wrong, completely out of place, right? So where do we begin? Well, first we need to abstract UX and UI at a higher level. So centralizing actually, some of these functions was the first key to finding more consistency. And second, we need to find a way to kind of operationalize design. So design culture at Neo4j was, it's fairly siloed, fairly immature. We're really, engineering brain is like this and design brain is like this. We've got some work to do. And we also needed to find ways to get designers working more efficiently, right? Having a one-to-one relationship with a designer and an engineering team, at the rate we're growing, it just doesn't work. So in short, we need new structures, we need new processes, and we need to support a complex redesign of 3 products and the unification into a single UI, and do so, frankly, without being hated by all of our colleagues. So this is what we did. So this is the beginning of an evolution at Neo4j, and the key first change that we're focused on is the establishment of a new team, a design system team. So you may have come across design systems. You might see them published as component libraries. It kind of looks like, here's the Lego from which you can build new products, right? that's kind of the tip of the iceberg. Actually, when you think about a design system, it's fundamentally an operational change within the business, right? So this is, just a small part of what the design system is, but really it's about operationalizing design. It's a change in structure and a change in process. So our design system, which we call Neo4j design language, we've GPL'd it and it will be released soon. So if you're interested, you can go and take a look at it. You can use it. And it centralizes and operationalizes design in a way that scales. So it embeds, as the very first step, research, best practice. So things like interaction design, color theory, accessibility, all of this is embedded at the very first step. And it's materialized as an output from the design system, right? And essentially what we're then able to do is, if I skip on to the next part, designers and design teams then become consumers of the design system. So they're able to actually take, these either pre-made components, whether it's, buttons, and by the way, we have more than 20 ways to build a button. Don't get me started on modals. We probably had 30 ways to build modals, but we now have one way to do it. And if a component isn't in the design system, it can be of the design system. So you're able to take the atoms and the molecules of the design system to build new things. Now, the really neat thing about this is that the designers who are associated with the individual products here are now able to spend time actually designing complex and more specific UI that's relevant to these products. So actually adding real customer value. And the same goes for the front-end engineers who, don't need to build a button. They can tear it down from our storybook or our zero-height repository and just use that and know it will be right, not just in terms of how it looks, but how it's coded. So this is the first way we began to really scale out design. So, for a company that's very fluent in engineering, right, this is a big change for Neo4j. And I think we're getting better, we're getting more fluent at it. It isn't by any stretch kind of the end of the story here. But it's really exciting for me to see, design and UX culture flourishing in an organization that's, amazing at engineering. Now, if we can bring the design part up, right, we've got the Ferrari engine for the database. Now we need kind of the, the Pininfarina wrapper around it to make a world-class product. So that's enough ranting for me about design. What I'll do now is I'll hand over to Michael, and he's going to run you through a demo, and you can actually see, the output of this process and see Workspace in action as the first step.
Super. Thanks a lot, Ian. Let me just put this to the side real quick. So you've seen parts of this already, but I added a little bit of spicing on top so it doesn't get boring. And I just need to really quickly switch this screen to mirror. Otherwise, I'm looking at... Actually, let me see if I can just push this over and, oops. Okay, no, I don't think that's such a good idea. Because this screen here flickers on and off and it's really confusing, so I'll just switch to mirror in 1 second. Come on. Mirror. Okay, cool. So this time I did something different. Instead of using ORDB3, I created an Aura DS instance, which is the data science cloud offering. So that means we can also use data science library algorithms on top of our data as well. So to go back to Aura, for people that signed up to the preview, we have a special URL that you can get from us that will actually change the Aura UI to not have the 3 buttons, query, explore, and import, but just open Workspace. And basically, if you click open Workspace, it connects you to the Workspace. Soon, the connection URL handling will be added as well. So this is still preview to say so. So I have to copy paste the connection URL and also enter my password manually. In the future, this will all be handled with single sign-on, so you don't have to actually log into the products individually as such. So it connects to Workspace, connects to this database, and usually you would see, depending if you have already data in your database in Aura or not, it would either switch to the Import tab or to the Explore tab. So one of the goals here for Workspace in Aura is also, as Emil mentioned in the keynote, we have between 3,000 to 5,000 new registrations every week on Aura. So for those people that have never seen and never used Neo4j, we want to just give them a much smoother experience getting started. And so having this in one place and all the tools in one place and having the ability without any additional having to find where to do it, getting, for instance, their own data in becomes really interesting as such, right? And for data importer, as I showed you before, let me just fetch this. We can add the nodes. So for those of you that have used arrows before, the modeling or the drawing UI is kind of taken from arrows. So all the things that work in arrows work. So you can basically create these nodes. You can pull out relationships. You can invert the relationships. You can select multiple, delete them. You can move stuff around. You can zoom things and so on. So everything that works in arrow works also in this UI as well. And when you create a node in this model, you see that it has a dashed line relationships as well. That means it's not completed. So it has a label, but that's about it. And only when I add this file here, if I add this file here, my attendees file, and add some properties from that. So first name, last name, job function, participant ID. This is kind of the first bit of information that I can add here. What's really interesting is that I can change the data type. So currently we have strings, numbers, and booleans. We will also add things like spatial and datetime support as well for the data importer. So that when the data is imported, it's actually on the fly converted into the right data type, so you don't have to do like any post-processing after all anymore. So it's still dashed lines, so we have to select an ID. So each node needs to have an ID so that you can also create relationships by finding the two end nodes and connecting them. And same is true for use cases, so we can basically add the use case property as well from the file. If we wanted to, we could rename this. So if I wanted to change, for instance, here, use case to something else, like, I don't know, name or so, then I could do this. But I probably don't want to mess up the rest of the demo, so I'll leave it like this. And select it again as a property. And then for relationship, you can either add the name here, has use case, or here on the top right. And then you can also redirect relationships left to right and right to left, and then map the file as well. So you see that currently it's still a little bit of manual work, but that's all stuff that will be better in Data Importer, basically detecting if there's like ID fields, if there are fields that are already known, then it will automatically map the stuff. So that's still something that's been coming. If you have attributes that would go on the relationship, you could also add them here to the relationship. And so you would continue to map your file. You see that the stuff gets green when it's mapped. So that's also quite nice to see, okay, I'm done or I'm not done here, right? And the other thing that's really nice is that this supports storing and sharing models. So you can open models and store and export and share models with someone else. But you can also download the model with the data, with the CSV together into one zip file and give this whole thing to someone else. So they have basically a mapped graph model with the CSVs in one zip. And it's basically a shared use case, to say so, right? And so that's something that I've done here. I just load a zip and I get like all the CSVs with all the file fields mapped and all the nodes in my graph here as well. If you want to, for instance, imagine I want to add another file. Let's say I have here the favorites. So you could, people could in the those few of you that could log into the event app could actually add like favorite sports and favorite vacation places. So that's something that I can add to my model as well, right? So I can load the model from someone and then add to it as well. So for instance, if I say I have a sport here and then say favorite sport as relationship, I can take the favorites file and map the sport column here. I can rename this into just sport and map this as an ID and then basically use the same as for the relationship. So we map participant ID to sport. And so I can also in retrospect add more data. Then I run the import. Those of you that have seen my Cypher tuning talk, the importer basically uses an efficient way of importing data by setting batches of data into Neo4j with unwind and then either merging the nodes or the relationship. So it's also idempotent, so that means you can run the input multiple times and it will only add the data once to your database, which is quite nice. Yep?
How does it handle bad data?
So bad data, because it sends batches, the batch that's kind of bad is skipped, but we made the decision we want to get the rest still in. So at the end it would report, so if there was bad data in the results, then it would basically report errors here for that file. In the future we'll add more options that you can choose if it should abort the import then. We're currently also working on, a data importer team is working on a preview basically, that you can just get a temporary preview what would it look like in your graph so you can see, okay, did I mess up relationship direction or name somewhere or any other thing. So that's coming as well. And as you see here, I've already showed it, so it creates the constraints for the keys. So something that we're also considering is, for instance, adding indexes as well, that you can say, I want to have these fields indexed, and it would also create the indexes. And then it basically sends a batch of, a list of dictionaries to the server as parameters, and then creates the node.
Is there any thoughts around adding custom logic in certain properties?
Yes, so it's a fine line to walk, right? So because this tool is originally meant for like new users. For them, like the complexity of a graph model and so is already demanding. So the more capability you add, or the more power to add, the more complexity you also add to the surface. So that could be something that we do progressive disclosure. So it's someone who's already like VC context sensitive, like this person has already done quite a lot of stuff. He could also unlock new capabilities. So one thing that's, for instance, here possible is already to select IDs that you can skip. So imagine you have like a bunch of the IDs that are invalid or like empty strings or NA or null or undefined or something like that, or dashes. Then you could say, I want to skip these IDs. And so there's I think somewhere in the config UI, if I'm not mistaken, you can configure that in settings, what are IDs that are excluded. And so you can imagine having more things here. And then also in the type mapping, you could imagine that you could pass like a Cypher expression or so that would actually transform the data into something else or so, right? But we always have to take into account, this is mainly for the like thousands of new users every week that have not used Neo4j before. And for them, this additional complexity needs to be far away from kind of shooting themselves into the foot on day one, basically, right? So, oh, sorry, I already imported it, but I imported it anyway, so it's not a big deal. So then we have query, which is basically a browser component. So you see as well that this is not full browser here. So basically the browser team extracted some of the components like the query and the frames and the sidebar. And then in Workspace, these components have been integrated because Ian mentioned that some of the projects have been around for some time. So actually Neo4j browser was launched in 2013. For those of you that have been there back then. And it had some rewrites, but the basic UI stayed the same. And so it also accumulated a lot of functionality that's now not necessary anymore because other tools to take care of it or the implementation in the database changed. So it's also a good opportunity to say, what is actually the essence of what people want to do with this tool? And let's focus on this, right? And there are other opportunities. I'm, for instance, looking forward to kind of merge browser favorites with Bloom saved queries and scene actions, that you can have named parameterized favorites that you can either call in Bloom with a command line type interaction, or in browser you can just run them. So it's almost like Cypher-based procedures in air quotes, or named Cypher queries or something like that. So these opportunities only open up by pulling all these kind of things together. So in browser we can of course look at our schema. We already done this in the demo, but I also added an. So, and here's the nice thing for people. It's also something that we are looking forward to, is basically to unify the whole schema handling across all the products, so that there's one consistent kind of schema registry that all the tools you use together, from GraphQL all the way to Data Importer and Browser and Bloom. So it's, you know, the colors are all the same in all the tools. If you choose like something, or like icons or captions, you don't have to tell the tools time and again what it looks like. So then that's something that I'm looking forward to, because after all, the model is the same, right? So which is also one of the advantages of the graph model. So I already showed in the keynote that you can query this kind of stuff. What I wanted to do now, so we can do simple queries, right? So we can just find our attendees and let's say some attributes, p limit 50 or something like that. And then it renders those. You have still full screen zooming and all the other stuff that that you can use here, right? And remember that we have the Google Cloud, so that's Mr. Bare Metal solution, right? So it's really good. And you have the table views. So here it's actually an interesting one. The table views in the query tool in Workspace got changed a little bit. So for instance, if I return attendee.first name and attendee.last name and job function, then this is actually the first iteration of a data table, so which means that this table now has sorting built in. That's something that I always wanted to have in browser. And you can also imagine that we have local search in the result table, and it has pagination, so you can choose how much is shown, and you can paginate to the results. And if you have, because it's a data table, right? So, and you can just enable these features, and that's one of the opportunities that we have here now as well, right? So that's all possible. And because you're running against ORDS, I thought we do something fun, where we say, okay, we talked about this attendee network, right? So we share industries and job functions and interests and where we come from and use cases and so on. Why don't we create a similarity graph, basically, and materialize it in the database, and then look at Bloom and graph algorithms to run on that. So what I do is here, I match two attendees. They have shared attributes. Then I aggregate on the two attendees, count how frequently they have a shared attribute. So if I just return the count total, this is kind of the total number of pairs, sorry, the total number of relationships between attendees that would exist. So from one shared attribute all the way to 15 or something like that, right? So that's almost the same person when they have 15 shared attributes. And so that's 80,000 relationships. Which might be a little bit much to visualize, so I thought I'll just limit this to a bunch of them. So I filter them between 3 and let's say 8 commonalities, and then we say these are similar, and we set the weight of these to C. Actually, what we can also do, we just increase this to, no, let's leave it like this. So this will create, I think, 20,000 or so relationships. Oh no. Sorry, 5,000 relationships, 15,000 properties. So now we have the similarity graph, and now we can hop over to Bloom to explore. And of course, we could do the thing that I did before, but we can also say, for instance, attendee, industry, attendee, and then we would see the kind of industry overlap network here. Come on. Google, don't let us down. It's cool that now I can always say Google, don't let us down, right? So I have something else. Scene is empty. Why is this not doing anything? Oh, I think because I need to refresh the perspective here for the new similarity relationship to come in. Okay. So attendee.
Create new relationships or new data, you've got to do the refresh there?
Yeah, so because Bloom is basically an what's the term? An opinionated tool.
Yeah.
So Bloom works on a concept of perspective. So even if your graph has like, let's say 17 different aspects that it holds, in Bloom, because it's usually used by analysts, they just want to look at one aspect, and so it's more explicit what's available in Bloom, so you can basically select and subselect what you want to expose in Bloom, and basically behind the scenes just adding stuff automatically would kind of really confuse the hell out of these people, so from that perspective it's an explicit operation to add things to Bloom here. So let me try this again. Attendee. Okay. Could be that my additional relationship thing kind of messed it up a little bit. It's interesting. Okay, I'll stop doing this and I just show you the attendee graph. So this is the attendee to attendee graph, which hopefully should work better. Does it? Something is really not liking me. Because I just tried it 10 minutes before the talk and it worked. What is the problem here? So we have, if we just look at the thing in browser, similar. So we should have 25,000. Why did it create 25,000 relationships? Did I run it twice already? Let me just clean it out and delete R. Okay, let's do this again. Where's the merge? So this is the where. Weird. So this created 11,000. Attendee to attendee.
You have to refresh it again.
Yeah, good question. It should just work. So I'm not a favorite of the demo gods, as you can tell. Even just fetching the attendees is not liking me. Come on, you can do it. Otherwise, you can also just look at the data in browser. Return, path, limit. Let's say 1,000. So actually, the update in browser that updated the visualization library made it much nicer for larger graphs as well. So it should be able to visualize the 1,000 relationships that are coming back here. Let's see.
This is beta, right?
Yep, exactly. But it seems to be really, again, something with this instance, because as you know, browser just worked, I know. This is really weird. Okay, this is definitely beta. Not sure what's wrong here. Oh, there's JavaScript error. So we have a JavaScript error here about like nodes and relationships. Nice.
Close all windows, reopen.
Yeah, I'll just reload this. We just reloaded. Something is either it's a network, of course, right? It also takes forever to load in the first place, right? So oh, right. Weren't these presenter laptops not meant to have wired Ethernet as well? So you see, I'm trying to load it. I mean, I can tether on my phone, perhaps.
I think we're almost out of time, Michael.
But we're also at time, so I'll give back to Ian to
I'll
finish.
wrap. It's fine.
Yeah.
No worries.
Cool.
I don't need any notes for this.
Okay.
Yeah, I can wrap.
Cool.
Do you have any feature of using graphs files now in the browser with this interface? It'd be nice if you could just, because different queries you want to show different properties.
Yeah, so not yet. So the whole discussion on graph styling and graph model is something that is still TBD, basically, from that perspective as such. So that's something that we still want to explore as such. So let me just go back. Where's the slide?
Is this available outside of AuraDB?
Sorry? Yes, so in principle you can use it outside of AuraDB as well. So I just want to get Ian's slides back.
Downloadable somewhere?
No, it's only online. Now I lost the slide, so let me...
Will this be in desktop?
That's a really good question, but I'll leave this to Ian to answer.
My closing slide answers all of these questions.
Yeah, 1 second, 1 second.
Perfectly anticipated everything.
So
I think we've got really slow network here. It's it's really slow. Yeah.
So let me just quickly go to...
Take your time.
So
Fantastic.
Here we go.
There we
Sorry.
go. All right. So the approach is Aura first, right? Getting desktop to consume and work in the same way as Workspace using the design system, it makes complete sense. That's an intention at this point rather than a formal plan with a timeline. The other side of this is if you just use one of these tools, at the moment the plan is nothing will change. You can carry on using these tools exactly as you have. However, at some point, our intention is that you will access these tools through Workspace. You might only need just one tab, doesn't really matter. The other side of this is that we see Workspace as a framework. So when we want to add new capabilities, potentially third parties adding stuff in, et cetera, et cetera. So if you are, a data scientist, you might need a different tool set. Your workflow looks a bit different. That's what Workspace will provide. Really quickly, we are here at Graph Connect as Graph Connect attendees. You get right to the front of the line in terms of access for this. It's not due to release until 5.0, which is in October. So you're getting like really, really early eyes on this. We expect the invite links to go out possibly in the next couple of weeks. We're just waiting on a couple of T's and C's to complete. We will run through a beta, which will take us from June probably all the way up to 5.0 as we start to add things like help and learn, onboarding, and fill in any feature deficiencies. So I'll wrap on that, but if you go to neo4j.com/workspace, put your email address in, and as I say, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, you will get your invite link, and we'd be really grateful for any feedback, thoughts, etc. that you have on Workspace. Yeah, that's it from us. Thank you. We slightly overran. Apologies. Thanks for your time.